Good morning. Delighted to welcome you all to our KTI webinar this morning. We're going to be focused on the topic of licensing agreements. And as a lot of you will know that have been to our past webinars, this Unlocking Knowledge Transfer series has been designed to really shine a light on the wealth of research, knowledge and expertise available throughout our Irish universities and institutes of technology. So this morning, we're focusing on licensing agreements. And we know that the goal of any negotiation is to really achieve an agreement that meets the needs and expectations of both parties. So we're really delighted to have some great speakers here this morning that can give you the perspective of the research performing organisation and also the company and how they approach licensing agreements. So I would like to take the opportunity to welcome our speakers this morning. We have Samantha Williams, Licensing Manager at Trinity College Dublin. We also have Lorcan Kennedy, Chief Technology Officer at Waterford Technologies. So the format of this morning, we're going to have Samantha speak to you first about licensing in general in Ireland, the rules and the frameworks behind that. And then Lorcan's going to give his perspective on engaging with the research base in Ireland. We'll also do a Q&A at the end, so we would welcome your questions. You'll see a question panel on the panel on your screen. We also have a chat function, so if you want to share any views on the presentations this morning, please feel free to use that. I'll also be sharing some information as well that we have available on the KTI website that can really provide you with a deeper insight into any issues related to technology licensing. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Samantha for the first presentation of the morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen now. Just want to say thanks to Knowledge Transfer Ireland for inviting me to speak along this morning. And just to say, hopefully everybody's still in great form after the rugby on the weekend. Sorry, I have to mention it being a Welsh person, and apologies to any English or Italian people who are on the call today. So today I'm going to talk about licensing from a research performance organisation, and I'll give you a bit of an overview about the licensing process itself, and also hopefully how tangible commercial benefits can come for any companies that might be joining us that haven't been involved in licensing IP from an RPO. Okay, so I'm based in Trinity College Dublin, so obviously Trinity is a research intensive university. We're in the heart of Dublin University. I'm not going to talk too much about facts and figures because I'm sure our audience here are very familiar with Trinity. So when we talk about Trinity Research, sorry, I'm just getting used to the slides here. Okay, so there are a number of themes of Trinity Research, and obviously there's significant research funding that comes from both public and private sources. And here there's just some of the main Trinity Research themes, and this is kind of going to lead us into talking about IP licensing. So it's multidisciplinary across a huge number of sectors, and that'll kind of feed into the presentation as I go on. So our office itself, we're called the Office of Corporate Partnership and Knowledge Exchange. So we're Trinity's Technology Transfer Office. And this slide really talks about the functions and the roles of our office. And you can see here, we're very much involved in promoting Trinity as a research partner. And we want to support industry engagement and the commercialisation of Trinity Research. So we also have a managed consultancy service, which is involved in supporting our academics, which might be wanting to be involved in consultancy. We manage Trinity's intellectual property, and that is patents and other types of intellectual property. We also manage industry academic research collaborations and the agreements that come with that. We support the creation of new Trinity campus companies, but what the focus today is very much on how we provide access to intellectual property through licensing. So I suppose kind of from an RPO perspective, it may not always be clear as to kind of why IP licensing and granting access to our intellectual property is important to us. But really it's central to what the university does, and this is outlined in our IP policy, and some key bits are underlined here. So obviously, Trinity is very proud that it performs world-class research, but we also want to translate this research excellence, if we can, into solutions that have both global and societal impact. We want to translate this research through collaboration and commercialization, and it is very much an essential activity for Trinity, and it ensures that we're safeguarding taxpayers' money. We're trying to get a return. We're trying to ensure that if it's relevant, the products can get to market. So intellectual property is very much regarded as a valuable output of research, and it often underpins collaborations, and we can translate it into commercialization. So I don't think the purpose of today is really to get into the absolute nitty-gritty of license agreements. So there's many among us who do that on a day-by-day basis. We might be licensing geeks and we spend our life in the depths of legal clauses, but I don't really want to do that today. That could be the purpose of another session, which I'm sure would have a lot of interest. But just to flag that, legally, what is a license and why is licensing necessary? So basically, it is an agreement or a contract that permits the owner of an IP, which is the licensor, and in Trinity here we're talking about Trinity, and it permits another person or company to engage in activities that, in the absence of the license agreement, they would actually be infringing the intellectual property. So many license agreements have complex provisions, but there are real three core components. Those are the grant of the license, the payments based on the use of the IP, and then things like indemnity and liability, which are really important. So from an industry perspective, and I know we have lots of people joining us today, so we may have SMEs or we may have larger companies and individuals who are involved in perhaps thinking about collaborating with a research organisation. But there are potentially, and this is kind of a top line idea, of the types of benefits to industry of licensing from somewhere like Trinity or another RPO in Ireland. So it's very much about sharing cost and risk, and also, the potential to develop new products and services. And I'm going to give some examples later on in the talk around that. Revenue generation, saving time, accessing world-class expertise, and also reducing costs by buying innovation. So basically saving costs internally in terms of R&D, collaboration and obtaining competitive advantage. So from Trinity's perspective, and part of the talk today is, I suppose, showing the expertise and capability that there is around licensing. So I just kind of want to touch around how we do it in Trinity. My role is a little bit unusual in that it is a dedicated licensing manager role. And we work within our team. We have a hub and spoke model. And we very much work as a team to negotiate licenses, as you can see here. Our case managers, which cover Trinity's various disciplines, we work together on a case-by-case basis. Valuation of IP is also kind of carried out on a case-by-case basis. And what we're trying to ensure is that there's a fair return to Trinity and that we share fairly in any commercial success arising out of an IP license. We prepare a term sheet first, and we use the national templates. I'm going to talk about those a little bit more, that are provided by Knowledge Transfer Ireland. Our office, the Technology Transfer Office, signs all IP licenses, and that makes it quite quick and efficient, and our industry partners tend to find that quite helpful in terms of kind of moving things through the process. And we very much have systems in place to manage and track our existing licenses. So we obviously have a big portfolio of licenses that have already been executed, and we stay in touch with all of our licensees. So just to acknowledge Knowledge Transfer Ireland and the support that they give us, both to our technology transfer offices in Ireland through the Technology Transfer Strengthening Initiative, and we're closely engaging with Knowledge Transfer Ireland on the next phase of this programme. I'm very much looking forward to it. But also Knowledge Transfer Ireland supplies significant guidance, and that guidance is intended for industry and RPOs to assist in us working together. All of our templates are based on the templates that are up on the Knowledge Transfer Ireland website. And so this just shows you where to get them. There's practical guides, there's license agreements themselves, all of the different types, exclusive and non-exclusive software licenses and so on. You know, there is the National IP policy, and we often look at these documents together with our licensees, and it helps us navigate the process. And in addition, we can very much say that these are based on international best practice, and it allows us to focus on the financial terms in the license, because the legal framework is very much based on international best practice in university licensing, as I say. So, you know, I think they're very useful, and I think, you know, the perspective is that they help the process enormously. So just to mention, there are obviously different types of intellectual property that we're licensing. And we'd say kind of roughly in terms of the licensing that Trinity's done since 2000, so there's obviously kind of a significant number of licenses, roughly half relate to patents, roughly a third to software, and then other types of IP, other types of copyright, materials, and know-how. So this is the types of IP that forms the basis of our license agreements. And again, I think it's helpful to say here the types of licensees. So this might be relevant to our audience, depending on what type of company you might be in, for example. So we are licensing to Trinity campus companies, and you can see that shown in blue here. So this shows our licensing options and assignments that we do every year. And you can see in blue is the campus companies, in red is the collaborating companies. So these types of companies tend to have collaborated with Trinity and may have made a financial contribution to a collaborative project, and in return for that they have an option to take a license at the end of the project. You know, there's all sorts of state funding in relation to collaborating companies with research performing organisations coming from SFI, from Enterprise Ireland. You know, there's a lot of advice out there in relation to any companies that might be interested in collaborating. And then the grey companies, those are other types. So often our PIs have a lot of contacts in companies. If they're leaders in their field, they often new licenses can come that route, or licensees that have seen our technology online or have seen showcases of new intellectual property where there may be licensing opportunities. So it just might be useful to cover those types of licensees. And from our perspective, licensing best practice is really important to us. So we want to stay up to date with the latest trends. We want to understand, as I said, getting into the real detail. We're very involved in the Licensing Executives Society, which is an international society. And so it's not just university licensing. This is professionals involved in the business of IP. So there may be patent attorneys, there may be in-house IP lawyers. There may be companies where the individual is involved in IP transactions. So it's a real chance to talk to people from different professions and to understand kind of what's happening in licensing. And there's lots of other organisations here mentioned as well, including Knowledge Transfer Ireland, ASTP, RM TechFlow that our colleague John Whelan is involved in, and the European Patent Office, which is very interested in engaging with SMEs across Europe, which may not have been involved in IP licensing previously. So there's a lot of support around that. So I want to finish with a couple of slides now. So part of the remit of the presentation today was very much to talk about the tangible commercial impact that a licensing agreement from an RPO might have to a business. And this is talking about Trinity campus companies or spin-out companies. And you can see here there's 15 companies over the last 3 years. And then in the table at the bottom, you can see you know, there are significant benefits. All of these companies are based on Trinity College intellectual property, and there is a licensing agreement associated with all of those companies. They're across disciplines, from life sciences to medtech, physical sciences, and ICT, and you can see significant levels of funding has been raised, actually more than 40 million. At least 5 products have been launched on the market, clinical trials have commenced. There are 11 new Enterprise Ireland HPSUs in the last 3 years and at least 120 jobs created. You know, and just to acknowledge that our colleagues in Enterprise Ireland, the Commercialisation Fund, has funded a lot of these projects, and we work closely with our colleagues in Enterprise Ireland, both on the commercialisation front and the people that work in the HPSU piece of EI as well. So it's not obviously just our campus companies that we're licensing to. There are both multinational, large companies and small companies. And just a couple of other examples here. A company, Thomas Swan, that collaborated with Trinity, launched new products on the market a number of years ago, and things are going very well there. So this is kind of what's available on their website and also on the KTI website. And also another example here of a new product on the company from Euroimmune Diagnostics company, who collaborated with Mark Little in Trinity, and there is now a new product on the market around diagnostics in the kidney disease area. And I think it's also worth mentioning, you know, given the pandemic and everything that we've all been, the challenges we've been facing, you know, 2020 there were some significant events, even within the pandemic. And I suppose it's again to flag licensing agreements and the importance of them and how the kind of later on, even after the license agreement is signed, they are still a very important part to that business. To an acquirer, for example, to events that happen along the lifetime of the business. So one project is a Trinity campus company, a project started in NUIG, was spun out last year, and you can see in the middle of the year raised a really significant investment. And then a very big story as well in September, the acquisition of Inflazome by Roche, and again there is IP involved in there that originated from Trinity College and the University of Queensland. But I think it's really just to flag the importance of license agreements, you know, and certainly with the last story, the fact that there is the huge chance for patients to benefit as well. So hopefully I haven't gone too much over my time, and that has given you a useful overview. I look forward to the questions and answers, and I'll leave it there for now. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Samantha. That was a really great overview of technology licensing from the university perspective, and really great to see the commercial impact of the licensing work being done as well. Just for the audience out there to know that we do have about 200 people on the webinar today, and you're all coming from very different backgrounds and perspectives, so we'd really welcome any questions that you may have for Samantha or Lorcan. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Lorcan to give his perspectives on licensing technology out from the research base.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lorcan Kennedy. I'm from a company called Waterford Technologies. And my role here today is really just to describe a little bit about our project experience, and hopefully I can answer some questions that any of you may have. So I'm not going to give you a whole heap of slides, but I'm just going to give you a little overview of us as a company, what's important to us, and as we enter into these agreements and move forward with our project, kind of what our deliverables were, what was important to us to try and achieve. We could talk a little bit about what went well, about some of the things that maybe went less well. And then, like I said, I'm here to answer any questions. So hopefully you can all see my screen. So just talk a little bit about us. So Waterford Technologies is in existence for about 20 years. We started off in about 1999, actually 22 years now. We operate in the email archiving, search, e-discovery, and then we brought that in for files as well. So we built quite an extensive customer base here, Europe, the US. We operate out of Ireland. Well, we're headquartered in Ireland. We have a few offices throughout the US, and we have some presence in the UK and into Europe as well. We've got a fairly good list of clients, a lot of them fairly high profile, a lot of government, a lot of legal, a lot of medical. And with clients of those kind of profiles comes a lot of responsibility and things that they look to us for expertise in. So obviously anything that we move forward with, we need to reflect that, and that's part of what we strive to achieve, both in the deliverables, in the quality, all of that. We're involved very much in the data protection, data compliance, and our specialty is in unstructured data. So email and file primarily, but we do get into other data silos. In terms of our technology and our innovation, we have always traditionally owned our own IP. We've always traditionally developed our own IP. And this is probably our first joint venture in where we've kind of shared that load with somebody. We always thought that owning our own IP was very important. However, we do very much see the value of licensing some of that in at times where it's appropriate. So we're a very client-focused company. So we don't do anything that's not going to have direct application to a problem that some of our customers are having. We, like a lot of startups, you know, back in the day, there was things that we felt were important. Our customers come back and tell us, you know what, that's not really important at all. So we are very, very customer focused. We market our products based on return on investment. So while we're very far from the cheapest in the market, we do believe that we offer the best ROI in the market. And every aspect of our product is engineered with these in mind. So compared to our competitors, we run on lower spec hardware, the whole cost of ownership, everything. And we do try and drive that down. And this is particularly important as we carry it into the joint project that we did. We kind of say within our businesses, you know, in terms of stuff that we do in the cloud, and our project is cloud-based, we'll talk in a second, we do count the pennies and we count the fractions of pennies. And that's all so that we can drive this ROI for our customers, because that scales up very, very quickly. Our customers depend on us and have traditionally depended on us to provide them a managed service. So things like uptime, ease of use, all of those are very, very important in anything that we do. And these are some of the values that we went looking for, I guess, in anybody that we partner with and still do. So it's important for us. We're a 5 nines company. Our stuff has to be up and running all the time. It's almost never down. And in fact, this system that we're going to talk about in a second, since we launched it, we've never brought it down. So it's been up and running for about the past 6 years. Hasn't been down once. We brought little bits of it down to upgrade. These are things that are designed into the fabric. So when we talk about our project and we talk about the team that we went looking for, these things are very important. Coupled with that then, we're in a reasonably complicated business in terms of how we integrate into customers' environments, how we integrate into their business, how we integrate into their workflows, and where we try and bring value over some of our competitors is in the simplicity of what we present to them. So our UIs are very, very clean. They're very intuitive. We step people through a process. And again, these things are very, very important to us. Sorry, I just lost my slide there. So we have just a couple of metrics here that we kind of hold fast to. So we do email search. We must be able to search millions of emails in a very small number of seconds. Probably our largest customer there about 2 years ago, they crossed the 1 billion email mark. So we can still search all of their emails in about 10 seconds. So we'll find anything going back 15, 20 years. We have a lot of automation. And across our file servers and our customer file servers, we bring multiple servers into scope. We bring multiple geographies into scope. And again, it's all about the speed. When somebody's looking for something, it's no good having to take 15 minutes to find it. Although 15 minutes is a vast improvement on 15 days, which is what it might have been. So we're all about the seconds. And then setup time. So compared to our competitors that might run projects, installation products for days, we typically be done in about an hour. And those things are critical for us, and they're critical to the values of the company and to everything that we do, as reflected by just some of our customers that we have. And these range from large to small. So, as I said, we're here to talk about the project, and we're here to talk about or to answer your questions. So, in about 2014, we kicked off this project. We kicked it off with the Waterford Institute of Technology. We did have a previous relationship with them, so we knew a lot of the guys there, and we were in somewhat infrequent contact, I would say. We'd pop over occasionally if they felt there was something to show to us. We'd have a look at what they were doing, see if there was any overlap. And in around 2014, there was a project that they were working on that overlapped really nicely with something that we already had. So they were working on this cloud-based stuff that aimed to help people understand where their information was, be able to find that information. And it fitted very well with one of our products called File Archiver, which we did the same, but we did it on premise. So we kicked off a project that we called Syskin, and it was really to take what we were doing within our File Archiver product and do it for the cloud. Now, we made a decision during the kind of initiation of that project that we would carry just about nothing forward. So we pretty much abandoned our code base that we already had, and we architected completely new product, built cloud first, nothing to do with on-premise, and we got a very different thing. We put in some fairly aggressive timelines. So we started in 2014, and given that we're bringing what was going to be effectively a brand new product to market, we wanted to do this within about 18 months. And within that 18 months, there was a lot of new technology had to be pretty much almost invented, some of it anyway, and some of it just developed. New platforms, new engines, all had to be done. So we identified a team, and we worked with the Waterford Institute. They helped put a team together for us. And really the success of our project, it's and probably the same for a lot of you, I would guess, it's going to be made by the quality of that team. So we had a really good project lead who was familiar with our space. We had some very good senior engineers on that project that we were able to give big chunks of work to, big chunks of research to. We were able to paint fairly broad pictures of what it is that we wanted to achieve, and they're able to take that, go and do the primary fundamental research on that, come back with, well, here's what we think is attainable within the timeline and within the budget. Important to say that this is a co-funded project, so we stuck quite a bit of our cash in. The Irish government, through Enterprise Ireland, stuck quite a bit of their cash in, and then we had our resources through WIT. So the project was running, and there was a lot of things that went really, really well, and I'll talk about those. I'll talk about some of the things that didn't go so well, and as I say, my role here really is to answer your questions. But in terms of things that went well, the technology was made very accessible to us. So the licensing process was very straightforward. Really didn't cost us much of a thought. Not quite sign on the dotted line, but it wasn't too far from sign on the dotted line. We were able to agree terms fairly quickly. We were able to agree terms that worked out for all of us, that reflected the contributions that both sides of the project brought. And as we move forward and move this product into revenue, that allowed both sides to benefit from that revenue. So there really wasn't much of a sticking point there. We brought a certain amount of technology to it, so we obviously had a lot of know-how in this area. We depended on WIT to bring additional technology to it. And then there was whole new areas that we wanted to open up. So there was really kind of three pillars in terms of the IP there. There was what we brought, there was what they brought, and then there was what we developed jointly. And the licensing agreement that we came up with, it wasn't difficult to get all of those reflected in that. So I think from that point of view, that was something that went really, really well. As we see there on the last point, the quality of the team really, really was key. We were very lucky. We had some great people down in WIT. We're still in touch with some of them 6, 7 years on. We still occasionally bump into and touch base, see what they're up to, see if there's any areas of overlap. We had a couple of the key lead people who provided that interface to the broader team. They're really the critical people for us. And we had pretty good consistency with them through the life of our project. We had 3 people, 2 of whom remained constant. They stayed with the project. They were our point people. 1 of whom changed. And that's one of the things I think that probably went less well. And if we're doing this again, it's an area that we'd probably try and address just to make sure that we have that consistency. Being a university research group or an Institute of Technology research group, I suppose, they're always trying to accommodate people who are beginning their career. So you have a mix of people and a mix of skills. Some people who are very well seasoned, some people who are literally just out of college and looking for their first gig. We had a bit of a mix of those. And unfortunately, that's one of the areas I would say that probably went less well. And this is feedback that I've given to them as well. So we're not telling any tales out of school here. So we did have a little bit of turnover at that more junior level, and that was quite challenging for us throughout the project. But overall, when we did our post-mortem on the project, we do the assessment, certainly the things that went well very much outweighed those little niggly little issues that we had, and they were fairly few and far between. So in general, our project worked out very well. We got our product to market. We were able to be quite innovative. We introduced things to the marketplace that didn't really exist before. We gave our customers options that they never had before and that our competitors weren't given to them. So from our point of view, pretty successful. Our product, and this product, the Syscom product, is probably deployed now on every continent in the world. It ranges from installations where we have, you know, small little mom and pop shops who use it to safeguard their data, to where we have banks, educational institutions, hospitals who are using it as part of their compliance suite, using it as part of the rediscovery capability, using it to answer data subject access requests. And for a lot of you guys, I know you're all going to be involved and you've been assessing your own business over the last couple of years. You've got GDPR and all its implications. So pretty much every company really has become a potential prospect for us within this project. Everybody has these needs. We were able to use our collaboration with the Waterford Institute to get out a little bit ahead of the market, make sure we were well positioned, make sure we were ready for all the changes that come with GDPR and similar legislation in other countries, and make sure that we can give our customers the stuff that they need, the tools that they need, the support that they need, and the help that they need. So that's really just a really quick overview of our project. As I said, my role here really is to hopefully be able to answer any questions that you might have about how these things go or how it went for us. So with that, I'll be very happy to turn you back.
Great, thank you, Lorcan, for that really great overview of your experience of licensing technology out from Waterford Institute of Technology. Just very quickly before we move to the Q&A, I just want to share some information with you on some supports that are available through KTI. I'm just very mindful that our audience today is quite diverse. We've got quite a mixture of academics and industry with varying levels of experience of engaging in knowledge transfer. So if we can just share some information on just providing some background on some supports that have already been mentioned by our speakers. So the first one, Samantha has already mentioned the National IP Protocol. If you're not familiar with this document, this is Ireland's national policy on research commercialisation. It's a very important document for anyone looking at engaging with the Irish research base and looking at licensing or any other form of knowledge transfer from the research base. Really easy to navigate guide, and it sets out the framework of industry academia collaboration. That's available through our KTI website, and there's a lot of information in that. So I would encourage you, if you are new to knowledge transfer, or if you have some experience and just want a little bit more information, you will find everything you need in this guide. And also, just moving on, Samantha's also mentioned some of our practical guides. We have quite a lot of information on the KTI website, which does go into greater detail on licensing. We've got some questions coming in about spin-out agreements. You'll find that there, consultancy, anything you need pretty much in those guides. We also have a collection of model agreements as well for different types of licensing agreements. So you'll find those on our website. They are quite widely used across Irish universities and institutes of technology. They're not mandatory, but you will find a lot of very standard clauses in there. So it's a really good starting point if you are new to licensing to have a look at these. And then just finally, just to point out before we move on to our Q&A, we have quite a lot of information as well. If you're not familiar with the research base and you don't know where to start, we have a lot of information on our website, which will put you in contact with the right people. Samantha has mentioned the TTO in Trinity College Dublin, and Lorcan has mentioned his engagements with Waterford Institute of Technology. You will find technology transfer or equivalent office in our Irish research organisations, and the contacts for those offices are all available on the KTI website. We also have a list of current licensing opportunities, which you can scroll through on the website. And if you're a researcher and you find that your licensing opportunity is not on our website, please do get in touch with your technology transfer office representative, and they can give the information to us. So with that, I don't want to take up any more time on that. I'm going to go to your questions because we do have quite a lot of questions coming in. So Samantha, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. We have some questions specifically on Trinity. If a company would like to license intellectual property from Trinity, but the founder is currently a student, can they do that? Or is there any advice that you would give to that company?
Yes, that's a good question. So, I mean, Trinity is very active in student entrepreneurship, and we work kind of closely with an office called Tangent in Trinity around IP commercialization. So we tend to work together. If a company is interested, absolutely talk to the technology transfer office, and we can engage with other individuals as needed within Trinity. We're open. I think I've put my email address and so on kind of as part of the presentation, and we would certainly be open to talk to any companies and to put them in touch with anyone else we need to within Trinity.
And we have a question as well on licensing know-how. Is there any specific considerations a company should have when approaching a university about licensing out know-how? So I'm going to ask Samantha if you can answer that, and Lorcan if you've any views on that or experiences of licensing know-how out of Waterford Institute of Technology.
Yes, know-how is a really interesting one, and it all kind of comes down to the definition of know-how, because it can, by its very different definition, be quite broad. So I suppose the way it's approached, certainly kind of in the KTI license agreements, is that we license the know-how that's associated with a patent application, for example, and we tend to license that know-how on a non-exclusive basis, merely because it's broad, so it's sometimes difficult to define. So it would definitely tend to be know-how, which tends to be kind of information associated with a patent application, and you can see very clearly in the both in the National IP Protocol and in the KTI agreements, on a general basis, it tends to be non-exclusive. I mean, we would look at it on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it's possible to very clearly document know-how and to kind of very clearly ring-fence it. So again, we'd look at it on a case-by-case basis, but we are very used to looking at these types of considerations and know-how in general.
Yeah, from our point of view, I suppose, in terms of know-how, as I mentioned, we brought some, WIT brought some, and then there was some that we developed jointly. our license was a non-exclusive, and I suppose we started off a little bit nervous of that. But as we went through the process, you know, and James in the institute was very good at guiding us through that. I suppose our initial fear of it and fear of being of a non-exclusive license diminished and receded fairly quickly. So from our point of view, it was fairly straightforward. It was fairly easy to call out, you know, what know-how was being brought from whom, what was covered under the license agreement, and we were able to put any fears, reservations, concerns to rest fairly quickly and fairly early on in the process. So from our point of view, it was very, very straightforward.
And just picking up on that point about exclusivity as well, that's a question that's coming in. For companies that are approaching the research base and looking to license technology out, what, Lorcan, were your considerations behind looking for exclusivity, full exclusive rights versus non-exclusive rights? Can you tell us a little bit more about the considerations behind that?
Yeah, so I suppose, you know, traditionally, as I said, we always like to own our IP because that's part of the fundamental value of us as a business. So the whole non-exclusive thing was, we weren't really sure about it. So I suppose the way our project went and the way some of the core pieces were developed, they were developed in, while reasonably open, they were still somewhat proprietary in their implementation. So while the core piece of technology is non-exclusive, the implementation of that piece of technology is pretty exclusive to us. So the non-exclusive license made sense. It made it a whole lot more affordable for us, a whole lot more attainable for us. And we just didn't really have to worry about it because of the manner in which it was implemented, which was back into our IP domain. So we didn't really have that many concerns, and I hope I've answered the question.
Perfect. And Samantha, I'm getting some questions in as well about the valuation of IP. So how would you advise companies and universities to approach valuing IP and ensuring that the license is compliant with state aid guidance?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I suppose, you know, this is where kind of best practice certainly comes into play around valuation. Valuation of IP, is kind of always said, it is definitely not an exact science. So there are a number of different ways of valuing IP, but certainly from our perspective, we would certainly try to kind of look into the latest, you know, there's quite a lot of information around there, for example, around royalty rates in different disciplines. So we would value on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration the stage of the IP, the time it's going to take to get to market and so on. You know, we'd also look at considerations around, you know, what's published, you know, for IP at a similar stage of development, based on the discipline within which it falls. But I certainly would say that IP valuation is not an exact science. And I suppose the nice part about kind of a royalty bearing license is that it ensures that the university can share in commercial success in a fair way. And, you know, basically the company is making sales, therefore the university can share. So from our perspective, that's a very nice model, you know, and there is a lot of published information around there, certainly kind of in that arena, but it is very much on a case-by-case basis that we would value our IP.
And just following on kind of looking at revenue from licensing, another question to Samantha. Would you be able to tell us about where the licensing revenue in Trinity College Dublin is used?
Yeah, I'm really glad that's been asked, actually, because I'd meant to describe and explain that process. So like many other universities, Trinity shares its licensing income with the inventors or the contributors, so our researchers. And it's very much as an incentive of our researchers to become involved in commercialization. And so we call it disbursement. And we changed our policy quite recently, and it is very favourable to our inventors. So, for example, there's a sliding scale depending on the income that comes in per licence, but very much at lower level of incomes, very much a large proportion of that will be shared with our inventors. At larger amounts of income, we would share a larger proportion with the relevant school, which the inventor belongs, and with Trinity in general. So it's a very important point. Yeah, I'm glad that was asked. Thanks.
And just finally, to ask both presenters, because we do actually have quite a lot of questions coming through, but I'm kind of conscious of time. And we've got a lot of questions that are just very specific to individual projects. So what I'm going to do is pose those questions to our presenters after this webinar, so we can put you in direct contact. So we will provide answers to those questions. But I just want to ask both our presenters if there's one piece of advice that you can give to our audience today when they're considering licensing and licensing technologies out of the research phase, what would that be? It's a tricky question since our audience is very diverse, but what's your key tips?
Well, I'm happy to go first. I mean, I would say talk to us and talk to us early, because in terms of licensing, there may be collaborative opportunities, and we have an industry team that is expert in advising kind of industry how and the best way to work with the RPO. So it may well be that a collaboration takes place and that leads to a license. So my advice would be to talk to us early, and we'd be very happy to open any conversations.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, and it's not something I really thought about before, but just thinking about it there, I think the advice would be, I tell people to get out of their own way. In one end, what's stopping you? The other end, what makes you think you're an expert in this? And I just speak from our experience. And I'd echo what Samantha says. Like all these things, you got to seek some expertise. And we found in our case that expertise was there for us, was readily available, and all we had to do was go and ask for it. So yeah, I'd echo the advice, go and talk to your local university, college, transfer office, whatever it's going to be, and just see what you can get stuck into, because opportunities just pass you by if you don't.
That's brilliant. Thank you to both our speakers this morning. I'm going to draw our Q&A to an end. There's obviously a lot of interest in this topic, judging by the amount of questions that are flying in and the amount of people that have given up their time this morning to attend this webinar. So thank you for taking up that time. If we can just ask you, we're going to be gathering up some feedback post-event, so we'd really love to hear your views on this. And if you would like us to provide any additional in-depth information on licensing, we'd be very happy to do that as part of our KTI webinar series. So please just let us know what you are interested in. And also there was a question there about the presentations. We will be circulating the presentations after this event. We also are recording this event and it will be available on our KTI YouTube channel. We will send you out an email with a link to that. So that information will be provided to you. So just to say as well that our next webinar in this series is going to be held on the 13th of April, the week after Easter, and we're going to be looking at intellectual property and Brexit. So that might be a topic that a lot of you may have questions on, so please do get in contact with us if there's something in specific you'd like to know about that. So just finally, thank you to our speakers and thank you all for attending this morning, and we hope to see you at the next webinar.
Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.